Chapter 10. Sick with pain from his festering wounds, and the rib that had been broken by the attack of the boar which was now threatening to protrude from his side, the cat was further distracted and startled by the sound of the hovering helicopter as he was dragging John Faraday further into the swamp with the intention of feeding on him. In a panic, the cat dropped the boy and forced his pain-racked body to run toward the lake. Just as he had made up his mind to swim across the narrow river channel that made up Russ Lake, the sound of Earl Johnson's boat roaring down the river and into the lake caused the cat to head further downstream instead. Earl guided his boat into the spot that Tuck had directed him at the southeastern part of the lake, arriving at the same time as the cat. Crouched in pain and anger as the two men came within 20 yards of his position, the cougar fought the instinct to run and instead lay flat on the ground in a stand of scrub with all of his muscles tensed for either an attack or flight, depending on the direction that the humans took. When the danger was past, the cougar continued south slowly along the river until he found a dry hummock and a large wind-fallen cypress trunk to crawl under. Hidden by the tree trunk, the cat licked his festering wounds and slept fitfully until the moonlight woke him at about 10 o'clock that evening. Testing the wind for any signs of humans, the cat moved slowly south and soon came to the big Pee River and turned to the east until he came to a spot in the little Pee that he could swim across. The sound of laughter and a dog barking alerted him to the presence of humans directly across the water, and the cat's curiosity took over. Less than 100 yards away, a group of teenagers sat on a floating dock that was moored to the shore, and with the teens was an old Labrador retriever, sleeping close to the shoreline in the midst of the music and youthful laughter. The cat moved downstream and swam the 70 yards of slow-moving river, coming up into bushes about 30 yards from the dock. In spite of his pain, the cougar made a very quiet stalk toward the platform, even though the noise from the party would have made it impossible for him to be heard. The smell of marijuana hung heavy in the air, and the noise of the heavy metal music made the cat nervous. But it was time to eat, and his anger toward humans and his pain made him less than a cat and more of a demon as he easily and quietly leapt the 5 feet of space from the shoreline to the floating dock. The dog screamed in agony as the cat sank his teeth into his neck just behind the head, and a quick shake snapped the neck bone. The cougar then turned his attention on the teens that had slowly realized through their stupor that something dreadful was happening. As the big cat turned slowly and crouched all of the way down, ready to attack, one of the boys grabbed a fishing pole and slapped the snarling cougar in the face with a catfish rig. The hooks and the rod tip caught the cougar on the end of the nose, causing the cat to recoil a bit, more in surprise and pain, and the kids threw themselves in the river just as he lunged at them with a terrifying snarl of rage. Unable to satisfy his need to kill, the cat grabbed the dog and proceeded to eat him in full view of the stone teens that were treading water and screaming at the top of their lungs. It would be an hour before one of the boys worked up enough courage to climb carefully back on the dock and grab his cell phone to call for help. By that time, the cougar had long since moved toward the Pee Highway into a thick stand of pines and found a place to sleep. Tuck's phone rang at 1 o'clock in the morning, waking him from his sleep. "Tuck, Bob here. We've had another attack over in Little Pee. This time the cougar killed a dog and tried to get some kids, but they jumped into the river to escape. He is on this side of the swamp now, so my part of the plan for tomorrow's hunt needs to be changed." "Do you need me to come out tonight, Bob?" Tuck asked, still half asleep, but knowing that this was all part of the job. "No, just be at the landing at 5:30 to stage those other men that are going to work the water with you," Bob replied. Tuck was glad for the reprieve, even though it meant only a couple more hours' sleep. He would have to be up by 3 to load the boat on the trailer and get his gear ready. "All right, Bob. See you at the landing." And he went back to bed. But sleep did not come till just before 3 in the morning. Hannah woke to the smell of coffee and breakfast being cooked. She found Tuck in the galley just behind the area that served as a wheelhouse when the boat was underway. "Good morning, honey, I think," she said blearily. "Do we really have to go this early?" "Well, you could meet me out there about noon if you want," Tuck responded with a good-natured laugh. "You won't get rid of me that easily, Michael Tucker," Hannah threw back at him as she let Weston out for his morning run. They ate a small breakfast, and Tuck fixed a thermos of coffee, although it would soon be too hot and sticky for them to enjoy it. After helping Tuck load the boat on his trailer, Hannah loaded Weston and her rifle in the old Chevy truck that her and her father had restored. Soon she was following Tuck down Highway 701 to the PD highway. They made the turn and hadn't gone more than 5 miles when she saw the brake lights on Tuck's rig flash on and the trailer swing from side to side as he quickly came to a stop. Hannah had to swerve into the empty left lane to keep from hitting the boat, and there in her headlights was the biggest cat that she had ever seen. He had apparently decided to leave the river basin just as Tuck and Hannah passed the spot that he had chosen to cross the road. Tuck opened his door and stood up in the opening to try and shoot the cat with his Ruger while it was blinded by his lights, but the animal jumped back into the pines that lined the roadway and disappeared. Tuck motioned Hannah to pull the truck off the road on the right shoulder and maneuvered his vehicle over as he made a call to Bob Pike. "Bob, I've just seen that Cougar over here on a PD highway. Man, is he huge," he said excitedly. Bob replied, "I'm on the way now. Did you get a shot at him?" "No, I couldn't get out of the truck fast enough, but he was sure close enough, maybe about 25 yards. Hannah saw him too," Tuck said before thinking. "Hannah is there with you? What are you thinking?" Bob asked in a surprised voice. "Hannah's following me to the landing, determined to take part in this hunt. I'm going to let her drive the boat so she will stay out of trouble." Tuck was slightly embarrassed at letting Hannah browbeat him into coming along. "Okay, Tuck, I'll be there in about 15 minutes. If you got any coffee, I want to be awake when we call the colonel." Hannah came up to the DNR truck while Tuck was on the phone and climbed into the passenger side. She was still shaking with excitement over seeing the Cougar up close and personal like that. When Tuck got off the phone, she asked, "Where'd that cat come from, Tuck?" "Well, DNR official policy says that it isn't here, but if it's here, somebody brought it and released it, probably a pet that had gotten too big to keep or something. I know that some of the fellows that I run in the woods think that breeding coyotes and cougars have been brought in as part of the government conspiracy to reduce the population of deer and also the population of hunters. I used to laugh at that nonsense, but with the announcements last week that we were looking into reducing limits on deer because the coyotes plus hunting pressure were killing too many, I'm starting to see this side of the argument a little more clearly. Unofficially, of course. Then there was that DNR biologist that I cited on Friday for interfering with a hunt. Who would have thought that a thing like that would happen?" Hannah listened with fascination and asked, "What happened to that biologist? Did he lose his job?" "Nope. He apparently killed himself over his boyfriend leaving him," Tuck explained. "Tuck, that is just too weird," replied just as Bob Pike arrived behind him. Tuck got out of the truck with his shotgun that he'd retrieved from behind the seat and walked back to talk to Bob. Hannah quickly followed, stopping in her truck to talk to Weston for a few seconds. "Hello, Miss Hannah," Bob called to her cheerfully. "Had a bit of excitement this morning from what I hear." "Gosh, Captain Pike, I've never seen anything like that cougar. What a beautiful animal." Hannah gushed with excitement. Her adrenaline was flowing as she was ready to hunt. Tuck and Bob walked over the edge of the road where the cat had disappeared and cautiously looked for signs with the light. The sun would not be up for at least another hour, and neither wanted to be in the dark with an animal that was designed to be a killing machine. "Where did that attack happen last night, Bob?" Tuck asked, keeping a nervous eye on the tree line. "Straight through there on the river, so it looks like he came up here after spending some time in the pines," Bob replied. "We'll start looking right here, so head down to Punch Bowl and come back down the river to the attack site. I don't think the cat will be back this way before dawn. Let's have some coffee, and then I'll call the colonel and give him the news." Bob finished the last part of his sentence as his face scrunched up as if it was going to be painful. After sharing their coffee with Bob Pike, Tuck and Hannah continued on to Punch Bowl Landing and got the boat in the water. The aluminum flat-bottom boat drew less water than a comparable fiberglass boat, and, with the 35 horsepower Tohatsu jet, even the low water of the summer didn't pose a problem. Hannah, you drive once everyone gets here, and we give them the plan. I want to take this boat all the way down to just before the PD joins up. I'll load the rifles and get us ready, but you have to stay with the boat no matter what happens, understood? Yes, sir, Captain Bligh, sir, was Hannah's response as she stuck her tongue out at Tuck's back. Earl Johnson was among the first to arrive just at daybreak, and Tuck helped him get his boat in the water. By the time the sun was up, they had 6 boats in and several waiting. Then a call from Bob told them that several more were putting in over on the PD and would meet them there. Tuck waited until everyone was set, then stood up with his portable PA system and told them, I want everybody to single file once we get to the Russ Lake area. Spread out, but keep each other in sight. Do not attempt to take the cat by yourself unless there's a clear shot. Remember, that thing can jump 40 feet if he has to, so keep your distance. Tuck took the bow of the boat after casting off his mooring line, and Weston sat in the middle looking like a goofy cartoon dog with his new orange vest. Hannah eased the throttle down, and soon they were leaving everyone else in their wake except Earl and his overpowered bass boat. In less than 15 minutes they saw Bob Pike standing on one of the several floating docks where the attack had taken place that morning, so Hannah maneuvered the boat in and Tuck tied them up. Everyone else in the little flotilla assumed the positions up and down the river and kept an eye out for the Cougar. Hey, Bob, what have we got? Tuck said in the way of greeting. Well, there's what's left of the dog, pointing to the remains of the black lab that was lying partially in the water at the edge of the float. Much of the animal's intestines had been ripped out, and most of his hind quarters were missing. Ike is talking to the kid's parents now. There was quite a bit of partying going on before that cat attack. Even if there are no charges brought, those kids are in a lot of trouble with their folks. I've got men watching the swamp on both sides of 701, and we're going to start a drive at about 10 o'clock. Why so late, Bob? Tuck questioned. Well, the colonel is sending us a state hunter with a pack of hounds that should be here in an hour or so. If his hounds will run a cougar, we'll have a better chance of killing it, so the call was made to wait a couple hours longer. By the way, Colonel Muir said it was quite a stroke of good luck to see the cat this morning. I would have to agree. A minute more or less, and who knows where the darn thing might have shown up next, was Bob's response, although it was obvious that he was anxious to begin as much as Tuck was. I'm going out in the river, Bob. Call me on the radio if anything new develops. I want to relay the reason for the delay to the men, Tuck said as he got back in the boat and pushed him away from the dock. Hannah, let's ease back up the river to the first boat and work our way back down. You want a shot of coffee, love? Love? She asked laughingly. Boy, there's nothing like a romantic cruise on a river looking for a killer cat to bring out the best in a fella, is there? Pour me a cup. And she slowly made their way back up the river, checking with the other boats in turn while keeping an eye out for the cat. As they got back to the big PD, the radio crackled with Bob's news. Sergeant Tucker, come in. Came through the speaker on the Marine Band FM. Go ahead, Captain Pike, replied Tuck, keeping it respectfully business with all of the ears listening. I've got some bad news. The state hunter won't turn his dogs loose on an animal that's lost his fear of man. You've got to be kidding me, over, was Tuck's response. No, he's deadly serious and has already left our area. We're going to start to drive toward 701 in about 10 minutes. Stand by, over and out. All but one of the men on the water had an FM receiver and heard the announcement. If the cat came their way, they were ready. Tuck's concern was that they might hit each other instead of the cat, but they had no other options. While Hannah kept the boat about 30 yards from the shoreline and held their position with her rifle across her lap, Tuck unzipped the drag bag holding the FA and FAL and inserted a 20-round magazine. He did pull the cocking piece back and let it go to feed the first round of the chamber with a reassuring clunk, and then remove the magazine to load one more round to make it 21 rounds in total. Setting the rifle against the gunwale of the boat within easy reach, he picked up his Leopold Katmai binoculars and scanned the shoreline for movement. The radio crackled again. "Come in, Sergeant Tucker." "Go ahead." "We're moving down to the Lucas Bay Road, and we're hoping to flush this thing before we get to a much more populated area." "Roger," was all Tuck needed to say to his partner. The radio was more for the others in the search party. Shortly after sunup, the 2 county sheriff's helicopters took up positions to watch the highways that ran parallel to the river. They were joined by 3 news helicopters about an hour later that were told to maintain a safe distance from the hunt site. The more the merrier, thought Tuck as he scanned the shorelines for movement. Suddenly there was a crack of a rifle as 3 shots rang out downstream from Tuck's position. Hannah threw the throttle forward and the water jet propelled them at 40 miles an hour, throwing a rooster tail in her wake. The 2 fellows in the second boat that they came to were standing and waving their arms. "Over here, Officer Tucker, over here," they were shouting. Hannah pulled close while Tuck asked what they were shooting at. "Downriver about 100 yards, one of them pointed excitedly. "We shot at something swimming in the water." "Something?" asked Tuck. "You were supposed to be shooting at a big cat." "Well, it looked like a cat," was the miffed reply. Tuck took up his binoculars and scanned the opposite shoreline where the men had indicated they shot at something. "Hannah, ease us down there. That something is kicking in the shallows." Tuck slipped the 3-point sling over his head and stood up in the bow while Hannah slowly made her way to the spot that Tuck had indicated. As they came close to the animal that was twitching in its death throes, Tuck made out the outline of a large alligator lying in the shallow, muddy water. He slipped the safety off the FN/FAL and fired one round directly between the gator's eyes into the top of its head. Weston started barking at the gator to stop flopping and was now laying in the mud. "Hannah, quiet that dog," Tuck had a stern look on his face. "Please? Aren't you forgetting the please?" Hannah responded again, with her tongue stuck out. Then, "Weston, shut up." Tuck waved the men over and shot the gator. "Get this in your boat and take him somewhere where he won't spoil. I'll try to keep you out of trouble, but there may be charges. Just make certain he doesn't spoil," Tuck ordered the men. "Yes, sir, officer. Can we keep the meat?" The man that had shot the gator asked. "Well, just make sure that it doesn't spoil," was Tuck's response. "We'll work something out later." The radio squawked as Bob called in. "We heard the shots. I'm hoping for some good news," Bob said expectantly. "That's a big negative on the good news, Captain. One of our fellows killed a gator." Tuck worked to keep the laughter out of his voice. Bob's irritation was evident in his response. "A gator? How does a gator look like a big cat? Those shots have probably got the Cougar running in the opposite direction." Tuck didn't answer the second response, since anything that he said would probably be heard by everybody else on the bandwidth and probably wouldn't make things any better. Instead, he dialed Bob on his cell phone so they can talk in private. "Bob, how many men are on the roadway?" Tuck asked when Bob answered the phone. "The number's been growing since morning, Tuck. I think there may be at least 100 up here, down on State Road 2624 and up on the power line. Why?" "I think that we need a static line of men down to the river from the road just up from where you're located. That way, if the cat does try to circle back, he will have to run through the line across the road. Either way, someone will spot him and hopefully kill him. It would be safer if some of them had shotguns. As big as this thing is, our deer hunters will probably wet themselves if they get rushed." Bob chuckled at the visual image that Tuck's comments had created. "Hell, I probably would wet myself too," he exclaimed as he and Tuck shared a brief moment of laughter. "You won't guess what else is up here, not in 1,000 years, Bob said. "We've got idiots protesting the hunt and wanting us to save the cat." "You've got to be kidding me," Tuck exclaimed. "I'd put them down in the worst part of the cover and let them catch the cat for us." "Well, on the bright side, they're keeping the media at bay for the moment," was Bob's response. "Let me get the men organized to form a line here, and you check on the boaters again. Make sure that they don't kill any more wildlife than they have to," Bob said sarcastically. Tuck wasn't going to live the alligator killing down for a good while, but fortunately the colonel didn't know about it yet. "Tuck, what is going on? Can we pull into the shore for a minute? Weston needs to take a dump." Sure, hon, pull over where that gator was. There's a little high ground just in front there where the mutt can use it. He is not a mutt, he's a smart dog, Hannah came to Weston's defense as she motored over to the shoreline about 60 yards across the river from where the men were trying to drive the cougar from cover. As they eased into the edge of the swamp, dry now in the late summer heat and mild drought conditions, Hannah cut the motor and glided the bow of the boat up onto the low-lying hummock that was covered by swamp grass and palmetto scrub. Weston jumped out of the boat as it grounded and trotted off to relieve himself on a patch of dry ground. Tuck was keeping an eye on Weston's bright orange vest as the dog cast among the cypress knees when suddenly the dog stopped, started growling, sneaking into a position mindful of an animal getting ready to stalk its prey. Hannah, get your rifle ready, Tuck whispered as he jumped out of the boat with the FN slung around his neck and under his left arm. He switched the safety down and off and then eased to where the dog was still in a crouch and growing more agitated. When Tuck came closer to Weston, he positioned the rifle in the shooting position and swung it to his left while looking through the scope that he had set on the lowest magnification and also with his left eye open. As he panned further in front of the dog, the image of a big brown cat head came into view, looking at the dog with his teeth bared. The cat's body was hidden by a big cypress, so Tuck tried to hit the head before it could move either toward him or toward the dog. Just as he pulled the trigger, the cougar spun around with lightning speed and bolted off back in the direction of Russ Lakes. Tuck's first shot blew a hand-sized chunk of bark from the cypress tree and was followed closely by two more that missed the cat by inches as it fled through the thick cypress and scrub oak at incredible speed. Hannah, call Bob on the radio and tell him the cat's on this side, Tuck yelled as he ran after Weston, who was in hot pursuit of the cougar. Tell him that your stupid dog is chasing it, and we need some more dogs over here too. For all Tuck knew, Weston probably thought he could retrieve the cat that was twice his size and bring him back like he did when Hannah shot squirrels out of her dad's pecan trees. All Tuck could think of now was trying to get to the dog before the dog got to the cougar. He knew that Weston was no match for the big cat, or for any cat that matter, and couldn't bear the thought of Hannah mourning that dumb dog. Weston wasn't thinking so much about the cat as he was thinking that if Tuck shot at it, then Tuck wanted him to retrieve it. So he ran quickly after the deadly animal that was hobbled by his wounds and the infection that set in. The cougar was crazed by his pain, and having been chased before by coyotes, his natural fear of dogs took over. So he instinctively looked for a high place to escape the dog that was running after him, then jumped down and kill him. A large live oak provided the perfect perch, and the cat unhesitatingly went up the tree, using his powerful hind legs to propel himself into the canopy before the trailing dog saw him. Weston ran right under the tree without even looking up. All he knew was that somewhere in front of him was the cat, and he was going to catch the cat. Tuck came to a stop directly under the oak and bent forward to get his wind. The temperature had climbed to the 90s again, and in the swamp the humidity was close to 100%. He was wringing wet with sweat and had jumped out of the boat without his mosquito net, leaving his face and neck open to the little bloodsuckers that were arriving in swarms. Weston, come here, boy, he shouted several times, and looked up just as the dog walked back to the little clear spot with his tongue hung all the way out. As Tuck straightened up, the dog's eyes went to the large limb of the oak directly over Tuck's head where the cougar was crouched, ready to spring on the unsuspecting man. Weston started barking like he did when another dog invaded his territory and ran toward the tree. Tuck's gut told him that he was in serious trouble and spun around while raising the rifle toward the canopy of the oak tree over his head. The last thing he heard was the crack of Hannah's rifle as she dumped the cougar with a well-placed shot to the back of the head. The little 140-grain Hornady spire point entered just behind the cougar's left ear and exited the right socket, killing the cat instantly. Unfortunately, the dead weight of the cat landed directly on Tuck's head and shoulders, knocking him unconscious. Tuck woke to find himself in the back of an EMS ambulance that was getting ready to transport him to the Georgetown County Hospital. He had a neck brace on and was strapped to the transport gurney with two MS personnel treating him and checking his vitals. Hannah and Bob were at the door of the ambulance talking to several sheriff's deputies and some of the hunters that had carried Tuck back to their boats and ferried him across the Little Petey River to State Road 2624 Command Center, where he now lay dazed in the back of the ambulance. All of the major news crews were there, including the red-haired lady from WLIB. "What happened?" Tuck asked weakly. "Hannah shot that cougar out of the tree just before it jumped on you," Bob exclaimed. "You got yourself quite a young lady there, Tuck." Hannah laughed and gave Bob a good-natured slap on the shoulder. "I think it did more damage falling on him than if I'd let it go ahead and jump on Tuck's head," was her joking reply. Then in a more serious tone, "Let them taking on to Georgetown, Bob. The bad news can wait until tomorrow after Tuck is rested." "Bad news? What bad news?" Tuck had trouble talking and was very groggy from the sedative that had been administered to him after he woke. "It wasn't your cat, Tuck. There were 2 of them in the swamp, maybe more. It looked like this one may have been attacked by a much larger male from the bite wounds in the back of his neck," was Bob's rather ominous answer. "But we'll have to worry about that after you get some rest. Hannah's going to ride the ambulance with you while I take Weston and your gear back to the marina. One of our fellows will bring Hannah's truck down, and her dad is going to pick her up later in Georgetown. Now you 2 go on. I've got a lot of calls to make." Bob was relieved that Tuck's injuries were relatively minor as far as they could tell without a CAT scan. His main concern now was that a big cougar with a taste for human flesh was still on the loose, and they may have lost their best opportunity to stop it. It was time to call the colonel.